Ever wonder how a breakthrough idea actually becomes reality? Hi, I'm Susan Lindner, and this is the Innovation Storytellers Show, where I sit down with the change makers behind the world's most inspiring innovations to learn how they did it and the stories that help them make it happen. If you've ever had a big idea or want to tell yours in a more powerfully connected way, you're in the right place. I promise you'll get new ideas for how to tell a better story to your audiences too. So let's dive in. Hey everyone, I'm Susan Lindner, your host of Innovation Storytellers, and we're going to have a fascinating discussion today. What happens when you are working with some of the biggest technology companies in the world to take them to the next level, to move them just a little bit further, to solve bigger problems than maybe they could solve on their own? And you use technology in a way that maybe even some of the greats, maybe the top 15 tech companies in the world, haven't yet gotten all the pieces right. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite Priyank Jain onto this conversation today. He's going to be teaching us, maybe giving us some insights on how we tell stories about upping our game around technology in ways that maybe we haven't thought of. Priyank Jain is an enterprise strategy and innovation leader focused on helping organizations harness AI, data, and digital innovation to drive meaningful transformation on the inside. Over the last 2 decades, he's partnered with Fortune 500 leaders to turn emerging technologies into measurable business impact across healthcare and very complex industries. He is passionate about building future-ready organizations where innovation empowers people, improves outcomes, and creates lasting human value. How much do we need that today in the world of AI, Priyank?
Absolutely. I think we sometimes underestimate that.
Yeah. So just to give my listeners a little setup, you work with Atlassian and you used to be at IBM, and you work with some of the top customers of Atlassian today to help them solve some of the biggest challenges that they're facing inside of their organizations. So tell us a little bit first about you, Priyank, before we dive into that. Most of us don't walk in through the front door of innovation. How did you get to the innovation space?
Well, that's an interesting question. I believe for me, innovation got introduced to me even before I knew the word innovation and what it actually meant. So
Mm,
I grew up in a small town in India, in a family traditionally rooted in business and agriculture. So
mm,
the higher education, or for that matter, the specific education, was not an obvious path. And I think I saw my mother as the first innovator around me because she challenged that traditional mindset of doing the basic education and moving into the business and made sure I get the best of the education. Now, with that being said, I became the only child within that town who attended a convent school. And looking back, that experience taught me one thing, that
mm.
that innovation is not always about building something brand new. It is about challenging those beliefs which everyone tries to accept, right? Now, that's how I've learned innovation. My dream was to get into medicine. Somehow it didn't work out. My father also aspired to do his higher education in medicine, and obviously he wanted me to be a doctor as well. But the interesting twist there is biology and I never became good friends. And
Mm.
hence I switched to computer science. Now, at that point of time, it seemed a failure to me. But then today, in the hindsight, when I introspect, I see that it's one of the most important transformations or redirections of my life. After moving into the technology, healthcare never left me. Friends reach out to me even today, asking for advice. I remember my college days. My friends and colleagues used to come to me before going to the medical room. I have seen a lot in my family wherein my family members struggled because of the one ailment or the other. And in the pursuit to help them, I kept learning more about it. The only difference which I see is that after moving into technology, I do not treat one patient. I rather build systems and help my customers build those ecosystems wherein I can help millions of people. So that realization became the foundation of my innovation journey. And I'm proud about that.
Yeah. You're a systems builder, you're a process builder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see it that way because there is a human angle to it. At times, we tend to overlook that. We focus more on the technology, but less on the human potential and the human angle to it. I'm a connector, which makes sure that we start seeing the things from a perspective of a patient, from a caregiver, from an operator, rather than just looking from an algorithm perspective.
Yeah, because if we don't factor into the people, into the process, the whole process is kaput, right? It just
Right.
doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You worked at IBM, right? Which I feel like in from having many guests who are former Big Blue employees on the show,
Yeah.
um, IBM almost feels like old world innovation, and now Atlassian feels like new world innovation. If you juxtapose these two, if you looked at these two pieces of your innovation history, what do you think is the biggest difference between these two places and how they
I
approach things like healthcare and life sciences or really complicated tasks?
Very interesting question. I mean, I've spent so much time at IBM, and I still, once an IBMer, always an IBMer is a true
Mm.
saying, which applies to me as well. As
So I
you
guess
know,
I guess that means you've been blue washed. Is that right?
yes,
No one gets brainwashed. Everybody gets blue washed at
Blue
IBM.
Watch. You
Yeah.
are absolutely right. And I've worked with some of the most innovative products and kind of engagements during my last decade with IBM when I was shaded with Watson Health. And we were kind of working together to make some breaking changes in the healthcare industry. Now, whether they were perceived equally well, the way we anticipated it to be is a different question. But then I definitely love that. And IBM continues to surprise me in terms of the way we innovate, the kind of culture we bring in. But there is one thing which differentiates, and I think probably that's the one reason why I started thinking even beyond IBM was the under challenge burnout, which I faced at times where I feel that I can do much more. I can offer much more to my customers. Being a big organization sometimes bring its own curse because things move slowly. And probably I'm a fast mover. And
Mhm.
Atlassian brings me that platform wherein I can probably do much more within the same span of time. And I can give much more value and do more justice to what I have offered to this world when it comes to healthcare. Now, a critical nuance there is I was more focused just on the healthcare customers during my life at IBM. Moving to Atlassian, it's more broad industry, which sometimes feels that, okay, since my passion lies in healthcare, whether I'm at the right place. But at the same time, given the experiences which I had while working with the healthcare industry, helps me relate everything to human potential. Now, it may not be when I've worked with some of my customers who are not healthcare focused, but then there is always a human side to it. There is always a social side to it. So I carry forward those learnings and apply those in my current life at Atlassian.
Yeah. So for those of us, I'm just backing up a little bit. So many of our listeners work in innovation across industries, whether it's consumer packaged goods or medicine or really breakthrough new AI software. For those who don't know, what does Atlassian do?
So Atlassian is a SaaS company, if you can say so.
Mm.
Historically, people have known Atlassian as a Jira and a Confluence company. What people do not know is Atlassian's biggest focus has been enterprise readiness over the period of last 2+ years. People sometimes make AI bots, AI agents, AI products. We have our own way of seeing AI. We have embedded AI in each and every tool and the product which we offer. So we call it Atlassian have variety of collections, which kind of solves problem for engineering, for R&D, for knowledge workers, and everyone. And the biggest differentiator, which I would say, which kind of takes us apart from every other organization, is our context. So we have worked with almost 400 plus of the Fortune 500 companies over the last 25 years. We understand their systems. We have a teamwork graph, which kind of connects the tissue between whatever products they use. So whenever I talk to my customers of Atlassian, I never say that we are here to replace, let's say, Copilot from Microsoft or Claude or for any other product for that matter. We are there to coexist. We can do better in certain spaces, and that's where we want to offer you value with the context we have, and it's called statement system of work, if I can say so. So, system of work is kind of making sure you unleash the potential of every human, whether it's the engineers, whether it's the people who are working in various other business teams. You connect them, help them make the best of their time, and kind of relate it back to the goals which they started with. I think this is one big difference which we tend to overlook. The leaders define the goals. And the teams, when they execute it, they kind of drive away from those goals. So Atlassian makes sure that you start from the goals, you execute it, and in the process of doing so, you unleash the best potential of the human by making the use of the AI offerings, which we have embedded in each of our products.
Yeah. So for those of you who might have heard the word Jira, right? That is the big project management software that Atlassian really is known for, right? And there's Confluence, there's Loom, there are other products that are probably operating in your business right now, Rovo, that you're like, oh, I didn't know that was Atlassian, right? I just know about Jira, for example, or I might just know. So you may or may not know, considering Atlassian has like 375,000 customers, that
Customers.
it's operating, whether it's on your desktop or in your systems, chances are it's already at work with you.
Absolutely. And since you
Yeah.
mentioned Row, I would like to call out. I sometimes meet some of my friends, colleagues, and who often mention that
Mentioned that.
we tried using Robo at some point of time. We
Mhm.
felt that it was not mature. I would say go try it out today. You will feel the
Mhm.
difference. It's enterprise ready. And you mentioned Loom too, and Loom is one of my favorite products. If you start using Loom, you will fall in love with it. So there are apprehension I've seen. People say we use Microsoft Teams, we use Zoom. Do we need Loom? I bet go try it out once. And if you need anything, I'll be probably be able to give you a quick demo, and I'm pretty sure you will fall in love with that product.
So I don't even think of these two technologies as operating at cross paths. Like I feel like I use them distinctly, and
Yes,
but you kind of can't live without them at this phase. Um,
absolutely.
so let's get into the stories and the innovations that you've worked on, Priyank. Tell us a little bit about some of the innovations that you've worked on and the stories that you've told in order to get people to say yes to them, whether you're talking to a customer or whether you're talking internally.
The way I would position it is I've worked on various innovative products, but one of the biggest challenging one is what I would like to bring in because that's where people feel that if we are working on a technology driven innovation, it's probably easy. And the challenge is just the technology. If someone feels so, probably I would say I would like to correct that sentiment because one of the most significant innovations that I have done was repurposing a product which has historically been used for social service to healthcare. So that's the use case which we started with. From a technical standpoint, it was difficult, but from an organizational standpoint, it was even harder. So the challenge was not the technology, but it was the mental models. People used to think about it in various different ways. Some used to think about it like as a government product. Some used to think it like as a healthcare product because we are trying to build it upon it, right? Some saw it as risk, but everyone was looking at that opportunity with a different lens. And that's where things becomes interesting because I learned that we as innovation leaders spend more time in explaining what we are building, or rather bringing the narratives or the story, as you called out, rather than building the technology. Because just the algorithms, the data, the platforms are not enough for making a collation. You will be working in silos if you just keep talking about the technology and don't relate it back to what impact it would have in the outside world, how it's going to shape the things. If it's healthcare, probably it might be patient. If it's consumer products, it might be every individual who is using those products. But at the end of the day, the impact is going to be on the people. So we tend to overlook it. And I've learned over a period of time, the biggest challenge is not about or less about explaining what we are building, but explaining about why it mattered, right? And sometimes it gets very difficult to convince a particular group of people. And I can tell with guarantee that those are not the technologists. The group which is most difficult to convince is the people whom you are trying to, I would not say whom we are trying to replace, but who already have a way of doing things in a particular way. And you are trying to innovate that way of working by giving them a different process or a different product of doing so. And I faced the same challenge by building this product because people were using the patient intake and everything, whether it's the process workflow right from the time when a patient walks into the hospital till the time they get discharged in a traditional way. And when you try and bring in a methodological way of doing it, they resist. It's a human nature to resist the change. And I think if we can tell them that what positive impact this change is going to bring to the lives of the people, that's where they relate.
So with that in mind, I mean, because every innovator on the planet knows that 80% of 80% of the room is always going to be there with their arms folded, right? At first. Because as humans, we don't want to change because we're wired for safety and security. I think what people forget is that we're also wired for novelty and excitement, right?
Yes.
But the security part is the biggest part of the brain, right? We want to make it to tomorrow. And I think a lot of innovators forget to compensate for what I call as the loss of mastery. So when you have been using systems for a really long time that you have built a business on, that you have gotten raises and promotions for, that you have built a team around, and maybe in your organization, your team, the strength and power of your team politically inside of an organization is by the size, the numbers of people who are on your payroll, right? It's the budget
Right.
that you command that winds up creating power inside of an organization. And so, innovation, a lot of people have argued on this show that innovation is antithetical to the corporate body because incentives don't exist
Yeah.
to make those, not make novelty, make change really the thrust of the organization once the flywheel is going, because no
Right.
one wants to screw with the flywheel.
Yes.
So I just read a headline today that said that Airbnb is going to now put hotels on their website. They have become so
Interesting.
powerful, right? The terror that existed, I'm sure, at Hilton and
Yeah.
Marriott and all of those big chains, that people were taking their summer vacations and going to somebody's couch and
Yeah.
some second vacation home instead of staying at the Hilton was a huge disruption to the hotel industry, right? And after a while, I started to see on like Better Homes,
Yeah.
Better Hotels websites, you could rent villas of
Yeah.
Marriott Bonvoy customers, right? And so suddenly we started to get a little Airbnb flavor on big hotel chain websites. And now Airbnb is saying we are so powerful that we might do deals with Hilton and put your stuff on an Airbnb site.
Yeah.
I always think that's because you've gotten to your Airbnb. It doesn't look anything like it does in the pictures. And now you want to go back to the safety and security of a Hilton, which I think is a really interesting analogy for actually technology adoption, right?
Yeah.
We go through the traditional way of the software that we've worked on. We hear about this disruptive company that's changing things and making life better. We 10, maybe 15% of us are going, let's go. And the rest of us are going, no, we like the Hilton. Right?
Yeah.
And then we have to tell a story that gets people to say, please try the Airbnb.
Yeah.
Please try the new thing. And then people get really comfortable with the new thing. And then we say, oh, by the way, we're going to be partnering with Old Fogey X software company to make a bridge that we tried to get you off the bridge before. So this is a really long way of asking this question. Priyank, what have you found is in your storytelling is the way to get people from the old stuff to the new stuff in the quickest amount of time with the least amount of casualties along the way?
I'll start with a mistake which I started doing early in my career, which kind of costed me and how I pivoted on top of that. Probably. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Tell us about the innovation and then tell us how you got people on board.
Yeah. So I used to talk more about data maybe 15 years before, right? But data only creates awareness. Stories are the ones which create movement. So you can keep talking about the data that will probably give you credibility. You can talk about the algorithms, but people will not align with that. They align around outcomes. So today, when I do any of the conversation with whether it's a technology conversation or for that matter with any of the executive of my customers, I rarely start with the technology. I've stopped doing that maybe a decade before. I start with the connective tissue. Now, if it's a healthcare company, I start with the patient, I start with the caregiver, I start with the clinician and the operational challenges we are trying to solve, because that's where they get to see what we are doing today and what we are proposing to do. Technology is just an enabler. And I think that's where most of us go wrong. We keep talking about what this technology will do, but we do not talk about how it will do it. We do not create the current state and the future state. As simple as that. It seems very simple, that current state, future state. But we build that from a technology perspective. We build technology architectures. We don't build a process side of current state and the process side of the future state so that people can see how the lifestyle will improve with this change. And that is what I've learned. And that is how I've innovated my style of storytelling, wherein not only I connect the tissues, but rather I also make sure that I focus on a combination of both data and the outcomes, not just data. So started with data, added story to it, and then I further improvised to make a good combination of both to make a real impact in those conversations.
I think what you said is really genius. And I'm really hoping that my listeners take this to heart because data does not drive behavior change. Data is a proof point to get people moving. Once you've convinced them it's worthwhile to move, and the only thing that moves that lever is actually emotion. So the science of storytelling says that if you don't drive neurotransmitters in the brain, the actual chemical processes of the brain, to either induce fear, joy, innovation, empowerment, excitement, etc., if you are not cognizant and conscious of the emotion that you want to put into the ears of your listener in order to affect the whole body of the listener to act, right? We are human beings that live in this meat suit. And we actually have to use chemicals in the brain to drive muscle tissue to move. It's why when you watch a horror movie and you know you are watching a fiction, you know that in 90 minutes time, you will walk out of that theater alive and well. And yet your palms sweat, your heart races, and your physical body is having a reaction to the information, the data that is being presented on screen. And every Hollywood scriptwriter recognizes I have to induce fear into the body of my listener. If I don't induce fear, the story, the data dies. Right? So that's a horror movie example. An action movie example is James Bond running across the screen at the opening of every single 007 movie. It is Tom Cruise running across the screen in every Mission Impossible movie, right? These physical attributes are caused by the driving of emotion before the data. We don't even know why James Bond is running. We don't know why the slasher movie protagonist is killing everyone. And frankly, we just need the emotion first in order to get us to go, oh, that's why he does what he does, right? We'll get to the story. We'll get to the deep data in a moment. But first, ask yourself, all of my innovation storytellers out there, ask yourself, what is the emotion that your audience needs to change their behavior? Because innovators are transformation artists. All of us are creating an Oprah Winfrey before and after makeover scenario. And so, like you just said, Priyank, is that what is the use case before and after? That is the same transfer. We are looking, when we want to innovate, we're looking for a transformation in our work, but also in ourselves. How do we become better craftsmen at the work that we do with the tools that any innovator is about to put in your hand? But if you don't make the case for the before and after, if you don't decide on the emotion you want your audience to feel, they will not move. They will move to fight, sitting there with their arms folded, right? Flight. Let's put this off for another 2 quarters, or freeze. I'm just going to keep doing what I've done because I really got rewarded for that before.
Yeah.
But no, right? So this is the psychological science behind storytelling and why we need it. So I took up a lot of space there, Priyank, but I just wanted to give people an awareness of what's happening in your listener's body and what you get to make happen when you tell a better story.
No, you're spot on. And there is one more thing, if I may highlight, is
Please.
we often see resistance as our adversaries. I have learned over a period of time that resistance is not opposition always. It's often information. That's how I see it, right? People are never resisting innovation. They are resisting uncertainty. So whenever someone do not agree to your idea, do not feel demotivated or do not feel that they are trying to knock down your idea. take whatever information you have from them, because that will make your idea more powerful, your story more innovative, and you will move from uncertainty to certainty. So this is one of common problem which I have seen people making it. And that's probably because there is a strong persuasion lesson which many people believe in, which says that good ideas always win. In my view, it's not about idea winning a race, it's about collations. So if you can show that how you are partnering with various different elements of the ecosystem, and if you can include that as part of your story, I'm pretty sure your audience will connect to it. So it's never about me, it's about us as a whole.
That's right. Yeah. And, it's why I think it's so important to map out who's really in the audience and what's driving them. I ask big questions like, what is the agony that your client is currently experiencing that your innovation will cure in theory, right? We don't want to be here offering supplements and vitamins. We have to recognize where our customer is bleeding from the neck and that we get to be the ones who rush in to fix it. The other is, what does my audience really hope to gain from this innovation? Because, like we said, there are not a lot of incentives internally for people
Yeah.
to innovate. So, what do people secretly hope they want? If they decide to put their reputation at risk and try out your funky new thing, or take their team who is already working at 100% capacity and say, will you do this pilot with us? What have you found, Priyank, has been some of the pushback? What's worked and what hasn't when you have teams that are really tense and tight about trying something new to really go ahead and go for it?
Most of the time, the pushback has not come from the technology side of the house. It's
Mm.
the cultural differences and the organizational mindset, which is the ones which has given the strongest pushback to me. And it is because we do not tend to cover their, I would say, their perspective often. So we try and push through an idea, but then
Mhm.
we tend to overlook certain. So I was talking about the resistance. So it's exactly that resistance which you foresee even before pushing through an idea. So an idea which is technologically relevant, economically sound, strategically apt may not be the idea which people are looking at, because it's less about pushing through a technology and more about adoption. So we tend to oversee how our adoption is going to work out. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about AI adoption. I'm talking about the organization and the cultural adoption. Like I'll take an example of Watson Oncology Advisor, great product at IBM. When we launched it, we felt that we are going to improve the life of so many cancer patients. And trust me, it was one of the amazing products we had built. But the sentiment was that Watson Oncology Advisor is going to replace the doctors. That was never ever the intent. But the motion died because we probably failed to catch that sentiment ahead of time. We focus on the technology challenges, we focus on the technology pushback, we rather fail to position it in such a way that people see it as their own. People started feeling that, okay, this is something which is going to go against us. So we have to be very mindful of human transformation and the human side of adoption rather than the technology side of adoption. That's what I've learned over a period of time.
So, how did you correct that? How did you make the doctors feel like you weren't coming for their jobs? Because that is where we are with AI right now.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's where that storytelling comes into picture. So if you recall, very recently, you will have your doctor sign an undertaking saying that can they use the scribers, right? Now, 2 years before now, if I used to talk to any of my customers and who happens to be a provider, like we don't want any use of AI during my interaction with the patient. But if you tell them that's going to serve three different purposes, and it's not just about the data, just talk about how it's going to improve the outcomes. So one, you tell that you will be doing less operational work and you will focus more on your quality time with the patient. Will you be happy with that? I'm pretty sure most of the doctors will say yes. Number
Mm.
two, we will say that we are not going to use this data to train any of our products or algorithms. It's just going to be there to transform operational insights onto the documentation work, which you do today. It's being done by someone else. And as a human, we tend to overlook certain nitty-gritty, small things, which is common for a human to overlook. But if you have a scriber who is making the notes, you can probably go back to those notes and even catch up some of the things which, as a human, you might have missed. So if you tell and nail upon the pain points which a particular practitioner or a provider is facing, and you tell that this is how it's going to solve your problem, I think that then only we shall push about a particular product rather than rolling out the product and then telling them this is why you should use it. I would rather say build that sentiment and get that agreement from them before showing them what the product is.
So it's about all these pre-conversations,
Yes.
right? You're doing storytelling prep before you ever roll out the conversation. So
Yes.
for me, this process has a name, and it's co-creative storytelling, right? It's how do we allow the listener, right, who's ultimately going to be the recipient of our innovation, to co-create a future state story with us, so that also as developers, it's so important that we're not building blind, right?
Yes.
Because aren't we amazing? Look at the technology that we can build. Fantastic, great. And yet we are not giving the people who use it enough voice in the thing that we're creating, oftentimes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We hear them upfront. They become the advocate to what we are building.
Right. That's how you turn listeners into advocates.
Yes.
And and one other thing, I'm an anthropologist, so every time I come into a new company where I'm teaching storytelling, I think of the company that I'm going to as its own country. You know,
Yeah.
headquarters is like the capital, and there functions the financial part, the political part. It's where the core values come from. But as you get further and further away from headquarters, and you're a large corporation with offices in Beijing and Budapest and Bolivia, right? All of that language has to translate across, and it comes with its own cultures, just like Florida and California and Maine are very different places. And the same messaging doesn't work across all of these places. But if we think about what are the incentives across the organization, and we talk about this word culture, for me, every company has a different culture.
Gotcha.
And it does, right? Just like any other country has a different
Yeah.
culture. Well, how would I approach understanding that? Well, I would look at the religion and the politics, the economics, the incentives, who does well, who does poorly, who leaves, who stays. These are all the factors that I take into thinking about how to write a story around innovation. And I look at the core values that are hanging outside the elevator at headquarters. And I say, okay, this is the one thing I know that everyone in this company, at least the day they got their job, believed in.
Yeah.
And how can I make any association between that and the corporate strategy, right, which is the policy and the politics of today, that is infusing through the rest of the organization? I look at these two things as bookends to try to create a story where brand new technology emerges out of it, not separate from. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times as innovators, we're so focused on the cool new thing we've built or the cool new process that we don't tether ourselves back to our origin story, our core values, and that imagine if statement, though, what's happening next? Can you talk about a little bit about in the innovations that you've worked on, how you take people from what was to what could be, like that future state story? And how do you get people to help you co-create that story?
I think a part of it goes back to the design thinking concept. So you
Mm,
do a lot of interviews and different personas. So if your product kind of touches upon n number of personas, maybe pick the top five, which are going to be the key actors in that entire product life cycle. Talk to them, hear out their pain points, hear out what they would say. And I would say we need to keep our biases aside while doing those conversations. That's the key. So speak less, hear more is the real mantra there. So you don't have to, just share, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Tell them what would you like that product to do to solve your problem. So start heavy. I invest heavy on those interviews, right? On the basis of that, I think the other problem which I've foreseen is, and I think many of my teams did that a while back as well, is we once, even after we have got the good data from those interviews, we tend to have our own biases wherein we judge the ideas on the basis of what we are trying to build. I
yeah.
always say no idea is bad. Just do the idea flow, keep the idea flow coming, and we will move into a space wherein we will narrow down the ideas, but not at the ideation stage. At the ideation stage, have every idea come in and weigh it against at a later stage. So that's another problem which I have observed, and eventually I have made sure that all my teams are very receptive to any to every kind of an idea, even after the interviews. The third key problem, and I think probably that's the only other one which I would like to mention, is we sometimes try to move too fast from an MVP to the final product. Let that MVP breathe, test it out fully, vet it out fully before you start investing more into that product. You never know, you may want to pivot just on an MVP, or you may want to just scrap that idea. We sometimes become too passionate about what we are building that we tend to forget that the impact what it's going to bring in.
I wish you would have had that conversation with Mark Zuckerberg before he plowed $80 billion into the metaverse.
Yeah, I know.
It's just incredible to me that and you have this like sunk cost idea,
Yeah,
right? You've
right.
invested your reputation. I mean, Meta changed its name, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they went and rebranded the entire company around the metaverse. He said, we are no longer Facebook, we are the metaverse.
metaverse.
Right? And then you go, you couldn't get legs on those little
Yeah.
avatars for the first 4 years. Like, okay, we clearly only half of us are metaverse. Like, but it was like, I think it's such a great metaphor for like what went wrong there, right? Is
Yeah.
like you're so invested in an idea, and of course people are going to love it. 2 years ago, I had people on this show saying they were actively buying real estate in the metaverse because they wanted to get close to Snoop Dogg and Kim Kardashian's real estate locations on the metaverse, right?
Yeah.
Influencers all over China were like, I'm in, let's go. And
Yeah.
yet the rest of the planet couldn't figure it out, right?
That is so true. That is so true. And we all make mistakes. So even if we have done mistake, I believe sense making is what is the difference going to be. So if you have invested billions of dollars over a period of 3 years and you plan to invest another few billion over the next 2 years, and if you do the sense making right now, I'm not on the right path. Okay, let's pivot now. You will save still some money and some time.
That's right. That's right. And that's where you have to open the box, put your ego in it, and then lock it back up and say, now let me put the story aside. Let me actually look at the data and see
Right.
what's really working here. Priyank, this has just been such an amazing conversation. Okay, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me. I'm pretty responsive there. So I'll be more than happy to talk to the like-minded people who have been into the space of innovation. And I'm pretty sure we will have some common stories to share and learn from each other.
Yes, and probably require some alcohol alongside that. And then the other piece is, so I want to ask you now, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for our three big questions I ask everybody who comes on the show. Number one, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
I would say phone.
The phone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there used to be times when people used to just try to reach out to their loved ones, and they used to write letters, and there was probably no ways in times of emergency they can reach out to them. I strongly feel that phone has kind of changed our life. There are so many in terms of the medicine space, healthcare space, but I think the list is like endless. But I've somehow resonated with that human angle of it, that people just picking up the phone. Now it's being used as a curse too, as of now. So I'm not going there. So that's the reason I did not say mobile. I said
Yeah,
phone, which gives you an ability to just talk.
that's right. And it gives your mom the ability to pick up the other extension and listen in on your conversation. Critical.
Right.
So, step two, we here on Innovation Storytellers, we dispel the idea of one genius um, innovator who changes the world, but rather there are teams of people who make things happen. So, if you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in history, which team would you have joined?
If I have to pick a team, I would rather go to the team which the first ever team who started considering using data, computation, and technology for the healthcare space. And the reason why I feel so is this team was not mature, definitely not mature. Technology was not mature because they were trying it out for the first time. This team was trying to solve one of the biggest challenge which they could, because they have to transform every matrix to a human side of it. And that's how my life journey has been. A young man who wanted to be a doctor rather became an engineer, and then spent 2 decades transforming the life of the people with the help of marrying the technology and healthcare. So I would rather go back to that first team and try to make that difference.
Wonderful. And today we have the electronic health record, right? And a thousand
Yeah.
other pieces that are changing our lives. And lastly, what is the innovation that the world needs now?
More compassion and more empathy. I think there is no way to innovate it. It's a human angle to it, but then that's what we are lacking in today's world. We are all rushing towards our own goals. And in the process of doing so, we forget that we are humans. We need to be showing more empathy toward others in any to every conversation which we do. I think that's what is missing from this world. And because of that, the tolerance levels have gone down. Because of that, there is so much of irony in the world, whether it's broken marriages, whether it's, kids just running away from their parents and the loved ones. It's just that, showing some more patience and being more empathetic. If I have a way to kind of induce that in every human, I would do that.
You might need AI to do that. I think we're trying to teach more. I think we're trying really hard to teach empathy to the AI more than we are to ourselves.
Yes.
And we should take a break from getting AI to agree with us on every single question that it poses, telling us how smart we are, and rather looking to our neighbor and saying, I really love that you're my neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Priyank Jain, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. This was absolutely wonderful. And I hope there will be many more of these conversations to come.
Absolutely. Likewise. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I truly hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you did, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss the next story that could inspire your own. And if you want to learn more about me or how I can help you and your team to become master storytellers to get your big idea to its finish line, head over to innovationstorytellers.com and schedule a call with me.